The moment I saw the empty bank account, I felt my chest collapse, like someone had reached inside and squeezed my heart with both hands. $80,000. Gone. Not reduced, not partially withdrawn. Gone. Zero balance. The screen on my phone blurred because my eyes were filling with tears, and I had to blink 3 times before I could confirm what I was seeing. I was standing in the kitchen of our house in Ridgewood, New Jersey, still holding a half-frosted birthday cake in one hand and my phone in the other. My son Brandon was turning 18 in 4 hours. His friends were coming. I'd ordered balloons, and the man who was supposed to be grilling burgers in the backyard, my husband, Michael, had cleaned out our son's entire college fund and disappeared. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back, because this story doesn't start with an empty bank account. It starts with what I thought was a perfect life. Let me tell you who I am. My name is Ashley Brennan, and for 16 years, I believed I had the kind of marriage people admired. Not the Instagram kind, the real kind. The kind where your husband brings you coffee before you even ask, where you finish each other's sentences at dinner parties, where people say, "You two are goals," and you actually believe it. I met Michael when I was 24. I was working as an office manager at a dental practice in Montclair, and he came in for a root canal. He was 27, tall, brown hair that fell into his eyes, and he made the receptionist laugh so hard she snorted. I remember thinking, this guy is either incredibly charming or incredibly annoying. Turns out, he was both. We dated for 2 years. He proposed at a little Italian restaurant in Hoboken. Nothing fancy, no flash mob, no drone footage. Just him, a ring he'd saved 4 months for, and a trembling voice that cracked when he said, "I can't imagine my life without you in it." I said yes before he finished the sentence. We got married in 2006. Brandon came along in 2007. A surprise, but the best kind. Michael was working in logistics for a mid-sized shipping company, making decent money. I kept working part-time at the dental office and picked up freelance bookkeeping on the side. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We bought a 3-bedroom colonial in Ridgewood when Brandon was 2. White siding, blue shutters, a maple tree in the front yard that turned the most ridiculous shade of orange every October. The mortgage was steep, but we managed. And here's the thing about our life that mattered most to me. We had a plan. From the day Brandon was born, I started putting money away for his college fund. Not a 529. I know. Everyone says you should do a 529. But Michael never wanted to lock the money into something we couldn't touch, and I was too tired and too busy to argue. So I opened a separate savings account at our credit union, and every single month, without fail, I deposited money into it. Sometimes it was $200. Sometimes, when I picked up extra bookkeeping clients during tax season, it was $500. One year, I got a small inheritance from my Aunt Patricia, $6,000, and every penny went into that account. I tracked it on a spreadsheet. I watched it grow. It was the thing I was most proud of in my entire life, more than the house, more than the marriage, because it represented sacrifice. Every vacation we didn't take, every car repair I put on a credit card instead of dipping into savings, every time I said no to something I wanted, that was Brandon's future. By the time Brandon was 17, that account had $80,247 in it. I remember the exact number because I checked it on his 17th birthday and almost cried. My boy was going to college without debt. In this economy, in this country, that felt like a miracle. Brandon was a good kid. Not perfect. He went through a phase at 15 where he barely spoke to us, wore nothing but black, and listened to music that sounded like someone putting a cat through a wood chipper. But he came out the other side. By junior year, he was pulling a 3.7 GPA, running cross-country, and had started teaching himself coding from YouTube tutorials. He wanted to study computer science. His top choice was Rutgers, but he'd also applied to Virginia Tech and RPI. "Mom," he told me one evening in March, sitting at the kitchen counter while I made chicken parmesan, "I got into Rutgers." I dropped the spatula. "Are you serious?" He held up his phone, grinning. The acceptance email was right there. I screamed. I actually screamed, and our dog, a 10-year-old beagle named Potato, started barking and spinning in circles. "I'm so proud of you," I said, hugging him so tight he wheezed. "Your dad is going to lose his mind." But when Michael came home that night, his reaction was muted. He smiled, said, "That's great, buddy," clapped Brandon on the shoulder, and then went upstairs to change. I found him in the bedroom 20 minutes later, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at his phone. "Hey," I said, "you okay? Our son just got into college." He looked up. Something flickered across his face, something I couldn't name. "Yeah, no, I'm thrilled. Just a long day at work." I sat down next to him. "You sure? You seem off." "I'm fine, Ash," he kissed my forehead. "Really." I let it go. That was my first mistake, or maybe my 100th, because looking back, the signs had been there for months, maybe longer. I just didn't want to see them. Michael had started working late, not occasionally, regularly. 3, sometimes 4 nights a week, he wouldn't get home until 8 or 9. He said the company was restructuring, that his department was short-staffed, that he was angling for a promotion. It all sounded reasonable. He'd always been ambitious. I believed him because I had no reason not to. His phone habits changed, too. He used to leave his phone on the kitchen counter, screen up, completely unbothered. Now it went everywhere with him. Bathroom, garage, even the backyard when he took Potato out. He changed his passcode. When I asked why, he said, "Company policy. We have sensitive shipping data on our phones now." Again, reasonable. Again, I believed him. And then there was his mother, Karen. Oh, Karen. Where do I even begin with Karen Brennan? Michael's mother was a retired school secretary from Parsippany who had exactly 2 modes, sweet as pecan pie when she wanted something, and cold as a morgue when she didn't get it. She had never liked me, not from day one. When Michael brought me home to meet her the first time, she looked me up and down and said, "Oh, I thought you'd be taller." That was 2004. She'd been delivering little cuts like that for 20 years. But in the last year or so, Karen had gotten worse. She started calling Michael every day, sometimes twice, long conversations behind closed doors. When I asked what they talked about, he'd say, "Mom stuff, you know how she is." She started coming over more frequently, too, always with a critique ready. The house was dusty. Brandon's hair was too long. I was working too much. I wasn't working enough. And she developed this habit of looking at me with this expression, pitying almost, like she knew something I didn't. One Sunday in April, about 6 weeks before Brandon's birthday, Karen came over for dinner. I'd made pot roast, her favorite, because I was still pathetically trying to win this woman over after 2 decades. She ate half her plate, then pushed it away. "Michael," she said, not looking at me, "have you thought more about what we discussed?" Michael's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Mom, not now." "What did you discuss?" I asked. Karen smiled at me, that thin, closed-lip smile that never reached her eyes. "Family matters, dear." "I am family," I said. "Of course you are," she replied, in a tone that suggested the exact opposite. Michael changed the subject. Brandon, bless him, started talking about a coding project he was working on, and the moment passed. But that night, after Karen left and Brandon went to his room, I confronted Michael. "What was your mother talking about?" "Nothing. She wants me to help her refinance her condo. That's it." "Then why couldn't she say that in front of me?" "Because she's dramatic, Ash. You know that. Just let it go." Let it go. His favorite phrase, the verbal equivalent of sweeping everything under a rug that was already lumpy with years of unaddressed problems. But I did let it go, because Brandon's birthday was coming and graduation was around the corner, and I was busy planning and organizing and doing what I always did, holding everything together while pretending it wasn't heavy. The week before Brandon's birthday, I was sitting in bed doing the monthly budget on my laptop. Michael was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Once, twice, 3 times in quick succession. I glanced over. I wasn't going to look. I really wasn't. but the screen lit up with a preview, and I saw a name I didn't recognize. Jenna. The message preview read, "Can't wait for next week. It's going to be perfect. She has no idea." My stomach dropped. My fingers went cold. I stared at that preview for what felt like a full minute, my brain running through explanations at lightning speed. A surprise party? A work colleague? A cousin I'd never met? The shower turned off. I heard Michael humming, actually humming, behind the bathroom door. I looked away from the phone. I said nothing. But something shifted inside me that night, a tiny crack in the foundation of everything I believed about my marriage. I lay in the dark next to my husband, listening to him breathe. And for the first time in 16 years, I wondered, do I actually know this man? I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself there was an explanation. I told myself that Michael, my Michael, the man who cried at our wedding, who held my hand in the delivery room, who once drove 40 minutes in a snowstorm to bring me soup when I had the flu, would never betray me. I was wrong about all of it. And in exactly 7 days, on our son's 18th birthday, I would find out just how wrong I'd been. The week before Brandon's birthday was supposed to be joyful. I had a checklist on the fridge, 23 items color-coded because that's who I am. Cake, chocolate with vanilla buttercream, his favorite since he was 6. Decorations, navy and silver because Brandon said he was too old for primary colors. Guest list, 15 of his closest friends, plus my sister Linda and her husband Greg from Pennsylvania. Menu, burgers, hot dogs, corn on the cob, and a pasta salad from the recipe I'd clipped out of a magazine 11 years ago and never once deviated from. I threw myself into the planning because it gave me something to focus on other than that text message. Can't wait for next week. It's going to be perfect. She has no idea. Those words lived in my skull like a song you can't stop humming. I replayed them while I was grocery shopping, while I was inflating balloons, while I was lying in bed next to Michael, who slept like a man with absolutely nothing on his conscience. On Monday, 5 days before the party, I did something I'm not proud of. I went through Michael's wallet while he was in the shower. I don't know what I expected to find. A receipt from a hotel? A condom? What I found was worse in a way I didn't expect. A second debit card. Not from our credit union, not from any bank I recognized. It was from Capital One, in his name only, and the card looked well used, scratched, faded at the edges. I took a photo of it with my phone and put it back exactly where I found it. My hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped the wallet twice. That afternoon, while Michael was at work and Brandon was at track practice, I called my sister Linda. "I need to ask you something," I said, "and I need you not to freak out." "That sentence has literally never preceded good news," Linda said. "What's wrong?" "Do you think Michael could be cheating on me?" Silence. A long one. Too long. "Linda? Why are you asking me this?" "Because I found a text on his phone from someone named Jenna, and a secret bank card, and he's been working late every night and acting weird, and his mother keeps looking at me like I'm already dead and she's just waiting for the funeral." "Ash," Linda's voice was careful, measured. "I don't want to be the one to say this." My stomach turned to ice. "Say what?" "Greg and I were at the Westfield Mall 3 weeks ago, Saturday afternoon. We were walking past the food court, and I saw Michael. He was sitting at a table near the Chick-fil-A, and he was with a woman. Young, late 20s maybe, dark hair. They were laughing, and she had her hand on his arm. I sat down on the kitchen floor, just sat right down on the cold tile. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "Because I wasn't sure. Because maybe it was a coworker. Because I didn't want to blow up your life over something that could be nothing. Greg told me not to say anything. I've been going back and forth about it for 3 weeks, and I hate myself for not telling you sooner." "What did she look like?" "Ash, I don't think—" "What did she look like, Linda?" "Thin, pretty, Dark hair, like I said. She was wearing a red top. She looked comfortable with him. That's what bothered me. Not flirty, comfortable. Like they'd done this before. I pressed my forehead against the cabinet door and closed my eyes. The maple tree outside the kitchen window was casting shadows across the floor, and I remember thinking how strange it was that the world could look exactly the same when everything inside me was falling apart. What do? I asked. You confront him, tonight. Brandon's birthday is Saturday. Then you confront him Sunday. But Ash, don't sit on this. Don't let it fester. You deserve the truth. I promised her I would. And I meant it. I really, truly meant it. But I didn't confront him. Not Monday, not Tuesday, not Wednesday. Because every time I tried to work up the courage, something would happen. Michael would come home with flowers, or he'd help Brandon with his college orientation paperwork, or he'd pull me into a hug in the kitchen and say, I love you, you know that? And I'd think, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Linda saw a coworker. Maybe Jenna is nobody. Maybe I'm about to destroy my family over paranoia. On Thursday evening, 2 days before the party, I made one more attempt to bridge whatever gap was growing between us. I cooked Michael's favorite meal, steak, medium rare, with roasted potatoes and asparagus. I opened a bottle of wine. I even lit candles, which I hadn't done on a random weeknight in years. We sat across from each other at the dining table. Brandon was upstairs studying. The house was quiet. I poured the wine and took a breath. Michael, I need to talk to you about something, and I need you to be honest with me. He looked up from his steak. Okay, what's up? Are you happy? With us? With this marriage? He set down his fork. Where is this coming from? Just answer me. Of course I'm happy, Ash. Why would you ask that? Because you've been distant. Because you're never home. Because you changed your phone password and you have conversations with your mother that you won't tell me about, and I feel like I'm living with a stranger. He reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was warm, solid. Babe, I know I've been checked out lately. Work has been insane. They're talking about layoffs, and I've been putting in extra hours to make sure I'm not on the list. That's all it is. I promise. And Jenna? The change was instantaneous. His hand didn't pull away, but his fingers went rigid. His jaw tightened. Just for a second, a fraction of a second, something passed behind his eyes. Fear? Guilt? I couldn't tell. Who? He said. Jenna. Someone texted you last week. I saw the preview. Can't wait for next week. She has no idea. Michael laughed. Actually laughed. Oh my God, Ash. Jenna is Dave's wife, from work. Dave Chen, you've met him at the Christmas party. We're planning a surprise retirement lunch for our boss, Helen. That's what the text was about. She has no idea. Helen has no idea. We've been coordinating through a group chat. He said it so smoothly, so effortlessly. The explanation slid into place like a puzzle piece, and I wanted so badly to believe it that I let it click. Really? I said. Really. Baby, I swear. You can call Dave right now if you want. No, I believe you. He squeezed my hand. I love you. I love Brandon. This family is everything to me. You know that. I nodded. I drank my wine. We finished dinner talking about Brandon's party, about whether we had enough chairs, about the weather forecast for Saturday. Michael loaded the dishwasher. He never loaded the dishwasher, and kissed me goodnight with what felt like genuine tenderness. And for about 12 hours, I felt okay. The crack in my foundation sealed itself with the plaster of his reassurance, and I went to sleep thinking everything was going to be fine. Friday morning, I woke up at 7. Michael was already gone. Unusual for a Friday, but not alarming given what he'd said about work. There was a note on the kitchen counter. Had to go in early, meetings all day. I'll pick up the extra ice and charcoal on my way home tonight. Love you, M. I spent the day in party prep mode. I picked up the cake from the bakery, 3 layers, custom decorated, with a little laptop made of fondant because of Brandon's coding obsession. I arranged the backyard furniture. I hung streamers along the fence. Brandon came home from school at 3, saw the decorations, and shook his head with a grin. "Mom, you know I'm 18, not 8, right?" "You're never too old for streamers," I said. He laughed. Fair enough. By 6 o'clock, Michael still wasn't home. I called him. No answer. I texted, "Hey, are you on your way? Need the ice and charcoal." No response. By 7, I called again. Straight to voicemail. A small knot formed in my stomach. By 8, I was pacing. Brandon was in his room, oblivious. I called Michael 4 more times. Nothing. I called his office number. It rang and rang. I texted Linda. Michael isn't answering his phone. She texted back immediately. "How long?" 3 hours. "That's not normal. Keep trying." At 9:15, I did something I hadn't done in years. I logged into our joint bank account on my phone. Not the college fund, our regular checking account. I wanted to see if Michael had bought the ice and charcoal, if there was a recent transaction that might tell me where he was. The checking account was fine, normal balance, recent transactions from the grocery store and gas station. Then, almost as an afterthought, almost like my thumb moved on its own, I navigated to the savings account, Brandon's college fund, the account I'd spent 17 years building, dollar by dollar, sacrifice by sacrifice. Balance, $0. I stared at the screen. I blinked. I refreshed. I closed the app and reopened it. $0. I scrolled to the transaction history. One withdrawal, made at 8:47 that morning, $80,247. The entire balance. Transferred to an external account I didn't recognize. The room tilted. The half-frosted birthday cake was still in my left hand. I set it down on the counter because my arm had stopped working. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Don't bother calling. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. Tell Brandon I'm sorry." It was from Michael's number, but the tone, cold, final, surgical, was from someone I didn't recognize at all. I stood in that kitchen for 5 full minutes without moving. The streamers I'd hung that afternoon swayed gently in the breeze from the open window. The fondant laptop on the birthday cake stared up at me with its little candy screen. Potato padded into the kitchen, looked up at me, and whined. And then I heard Brandon's footsteps on the stairs. "Mom? Is Dad home yet? I thought I heard his car." I turned around. My son, my beautiful, brilliant 18 tomorrow son, was standing in the kitchen doorway in his Rutgers t-shirt, hair still damp from the shower, looking at me with an expression that was already shifting from casual to concerned. "Mom, why are you crying?" I didn't even know I was crying. I touched my face and my fingers came away wet. The phone was still in my hand, the $0 balance glowing on the screen like an accusation. "Sit down, honey," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "I need to tell you something." That was Friday night. By Saturday morning, Brandon's actual birthday, I had discovered something that made the stolen money feel almost secondary. I'd been up all night, sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, doing what I should have done months ago, digging. I pulled up the Capital One account using the card number I'd photographed from Michael's wallet. I couldn't access the account itself, but I could see enough from the online portal to know that the card had been active for over a year. Charges at restaurants I'd never been to, hotels in Manhattan, a jewelry store in Short Hills, and I hadn't received any jewelry. But the discovery that broke me came at 4 in the morning when I logged into Michael's email. His password was still the same one he'd used for years, Brandon's birthday plus our street number. I know I shouldn't have. I know it was a violation. But my husband had stolen $80,000 from our son and disappeared, so I was well past caring about digital etiquette. His inbox was a graveyard of lies. Emails from Jenna, whose last name, I now learned, was Moretti, going back 14 months. Not a coworker's wife, not part of any surprise retirement lunch. She was 29, a personal trainer from Hoboken, and the emails made it very clear that she and Michael had been in a full relationship. Trips planned together, inside jokes, pet names that made my skin crawl. But the email that stopped my heart was from 3 days ago, sent by Karen, Michael's mother. The subject line was Final Arrangements. I clicked it open with fingers that felt like they belonged to a corpse. Michael, I've confirmed the villa in the Maldives. 3 bedrooms, ocean view. Jenna's passport is sorted. I've transferred my portion to the travel account. Your father's life insurance money covers the rest. Make sure Ashley doesn't check the savings account before Friday. Once you're there, I'll handle the story on this end. She'll get over it. Brandon's a smart boy. He'll figure out loans. Love, Mom. Karen knew. Karen didn't just know. Karen had helped plan it. She'd funded part of it with her late husband's life insurance money. She had booked the villa. She had been Michael's co-conspirator from the beginning, and every Sunday dinner, every pot roast, every thin-lipped smile, she'd been sitting across from me, knowing exactly what was coming. I closed the laptop. I walked to the bathroom, and I threw up until there was nothing left. When Brandon came downstairs at 8 that morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for him. His birthday cake was still on the counter, half frosted, abandoned. The streamers in the backyard hung limp in the windless morning air. Happy birthday, I said, and my voice cracked on the second word. Brandon sat down across from me. He looked at the cake, then at my face, then at the laptop that was still open on the table. You've been up all night, he said, not a question. Yeah. Did you find out where Dad went? I nodded slowly. The Maldives. He's in the Maldives, Brandon, with a woman named Jenna, and your grandmother helped him plan the whole thing. Brandon didn't react the way I expected. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He sat very still, his hands wrapped around the coffee mug, and stared at a point somewhere past my shoulder. His jaw worked silently for a moment. How much was in the account? He asked quietly. $80,247. And it's all gone. Every penny. He nodded once. Then he looked directly at me, and what I saw in his eyes wasn't sadness. It was something harder, something colder, something that looked a lot like calculation. Mom, he said, when they come back, they'll be in for a surprise from me. Brandon, what? Not now. I need to think. He stood up, took his coffee, and walked toward the stairs. Then he paused and turned back. Mom, cancel the party. Tell everyone I'm sick. And don't delete anything on that laptop. Not one email, not one transaction. Do you understand? I nodded, too exhausted and too stunned to argue. He went upstairs. I heard his bedroom door close. And I sat there in the kitchen of the house I'd built my life in, surrounded by birthday decorations for a party that would never happen. And I realized that in the span of 12 hours, both my husband and my son had become strangers to me, but for very different reasons. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo, sent from Karen's number. A sunset over turquoise water. A beach. And in the foreground, 3 pairs of feet propped up on a wooden railing. Michael's, a woman's with red-painted toenails, and Karen's, unmistakable in her orthopedic sandals. No caption, no words necessary. The message was clear. We're here, you're there, and there's nothing you can do about it. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I screenshot it, emailed it to myself, and saved it in 3 separate places. Because whatever Brandon was planning upstairs, whatever was forming behind those quiet, calculating eyes, I had a feeling we were both going to need receipts. The hours after Brandon went upstairs were the loneliest of my life. I sat at that kitchen table until the coffee went cold, then until the sun climbed high enough to fill the room with light that felt obscene, too bright, too cheerful, too alive for a house where everything had just died. It was Brandon's 18th birthday. There should have been music. There should have been laughter and the smell of burgers on the grill and 15 teenagers crowding our backyard. Instead, there was silence and a half-frosted cake and me, still in yesterday's clothes, mascara smudged under my eyes, staring at a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from people I couldn't face. I had to cancel the party. I texted Brandon's friends one by one. "Brandon's not feeling well. We need to postpone. So sorry." The responses came back full of concern and well wishes, and each one felt like a paper cut. Then I called Linda. "He took the money," I said. No preamble, no easing into it. "What money?" "Brandon's college fund. All of it. $80,000. He's in the Maldives with his girlfriend and his mother." The silence on the other end lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then Linda said a word I won't repeat, followed by, "I'm coming. Right now. Greg and I are getting in the car." "You don't have to. Ashley Marie Brennan, I am getting in my car. Do not argue with me." She hung up. I set the phone down and pressed my palms flat against the table, trying to feel something solid, something real. The wood grain under my fingers, the edge of the table cutting into my wrists. I needed physical sensation because emotionally, I was somewhere between numb and shattered, floating in that terrible space where your brain knows something catastrophic has happened, but your body hasn't caught up yet. I should tell you what the next few days looked like because I think it matters. I think people imagine that when your life falls apart, there's a dramatic collapse. You scream, you throw things, you have a cinematic breakdown. But that's not what happened to me. What happened was worse. I just stopped functioning, quietly, invisibly, like a machine that's still running but producing nothing. Saturday, Brandon's birthday. I didn't eat. I didn't shower. I sat in the living room and watched the shadows move across the wall as the sun tracked overhead. Linda and Greg arrived around 2 in the afternoon. Linda took one look at me and started crying. Greg, who is 6'3" and built like a refrigerator and has never in his life shown an emotion stronger than mild amusement, stood in my kitchen doorway with his fists clenched and said, "I'll kill him. I will actually kill him." "Get in line," I said. It was the first thing I'd said in hours, and my voice sounded like rust. Linda took over. She cleaned the kitchen. She put the birthday cake in the fridge because I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. She made me eat half a sandwich and drink a glass of water. She sat with me on the couch and held my hand while I stared at nothing. Brandon stayed in his room most of the day. He came down once, around 4, to get a glass of water. He looked at Linda and Greg, nodded, said, "Hey, Aunt Linda. Hey, Uncle Greg," and went back upstairs. His face was completely neutral, controlled. It scared me more than tears would have. "Is he okay?" Linda whispered after he disappeared. "I don't know," I said. "He told me he has a plan, a surprise for when they come back. He won't tell me what it is." "He's 18. What kind of plan can an 18-year-old have?" I didn't answer, because the truth was, Brandon had always been smarter than everyone around him gave him credit for. He'd been building websites since he was 14. He'd taught himself Python from free online courses. He understood systems, how they worked, how they connected, how they could be taken apart. And right now, somewhere in his bedroom, that brain was working on something, and I had no idea what it was. Sunday was worse. Karen sent another photo. This one showed Michael and Jenna at a restaurant. White tablecloth, candles, wine glasses. Michael was smiling. Not the tight, distracted smile I'd been getting for months. A real smile, the kind he used to give me. Jenna was leaning into him, her dark hair falling over one shoulder, looking up at him like he'd hung the moon. And Karen had taken the photo. Karen, who was right there, endorsing all of it, probably sipping a cocktail and congratulating herself on successfully extracting her son from the woman she'd never thought was good enough. I showed the photo to Linda. She grabbed my phone and almost threw it across the room. "She's taunting you. That woman is actually taunting you. Don't look at these, Ash. Block her number." "I can't. I need everything. Brandon said not to delete anything." "Brandon is a kid. You need a lawyer, not a teenager's revenge plan." She was right about the lawyer. On Monday morning, with Linda practically pushing me out the door, I drove to the office of a divorce attorney named Rachel Stern in Hackensack. I'd found her online at 3 in the morning. 5 stars, aggressive reputation, specializing in cases involving hidden assets. Her consultation fee was $400. I put it on my credit card because I had no other option. The checking account had just enough to cover the mortgage and utilities, and that was it. Rachel Stern was in her 50s, with silver streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun and reading glasses that she looked over rather than through. She listened to my entire story without interrupting. When I finished, she took off her glasses and set them on her desk. "How much did you say was in the account?" $80,247. "And the account was in both your names?" "Yes, joint savings at our credit union." "Then legally he had every right to withdraw from it." She held up her hand before I could respond. "I know, it's infuriating. But New Jersey is an equitable distribution state. In a divorce, we can argue that those funds were marital property earmarked for your son's education, and we can seek restitution. But getting the money back quickly? That's going to be a fight." "What about the fact that he fled the country?" "He's not a fugitive, Mrs. Brennan. He withdrew from a joint account and took a vacation. Morally reprehensible? Absolutely. Criminal? Unfortunately, probably not." I felt the floor drop out from under me. "So he just gets away with it?" "I didn't say that. I said it's not criminal in the traditional sense. But there are angles. If he used marital funds for an extramarital affair, that's dissipation of assets. A judge will not look kindly on that. If his mother conspired to help him hide money or defraud you, we can potentially bring her into the proceedings. And if he doesn't come back and engage with the divorce process, we can get default judgments that work very much in your favor." She quoted me her retainer, $5,000. I almost laughed. I didn't have $5,000. I barely had $500. "I'll figure it out," I said, because what else could I say? I drove home in a fog. The maple tree in the front yard was impossibly green, full summer canopy, mocking me with its permanence. Everything around me was solid and rooted and continuing, and I was dissolving. That evening, I sat in the backyard on one of the chairs I'd arranged for the party that never happened. The sun was going down. Potato lay at my feet, his graying muzzle resting on my shoe. I looked at the grill Michael was supposed to have been standing at 3 days ago, flipping burgers, telling bad jokes, being a father. And something inside me finally cracked all the way through. I cried. Not the quiet, dignified tears from Friday night, real crying, the ugly kind, the kind that comes from your gut and sounds like an animal. I cried for the money, for the marriage, for the 17 years of deposits, $200 at a time, while I skipped vacations and drove a car with a cracked windshield and told myself it would all be worth it when Brandon walked across that stage. I cried because Karen had sat at my table and eaten my pot roast and smiled her thin smile while she helped my husband plan his escape. I cried because Michael had looked me in the eyes on Thursday night, held my hand and said, "This family is everything to me." And he was already packed. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the sky to go dark and the mosquitoes to find me. Long enough for the backyard lights of the neighbors' houses to flicker on, families settling into their normal Monday evenings, completely unaware that the woman next door was falling apart in a lawn chair. That's when Brandon came outside. He walked across the grass barefoot, pulled up a chair, and sat down next to me. He didn't say anything for a while. We just sat there together in the dark, listening to the crickets and the distant hum of traffic on Route 17. "I filed a report," he said finally. "What?" "With the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3. What Dad did, transferring that money to an external account and fleeing the country, it might not be theft in the traditional sense, but it's potentially wire fraud, especially if the receiving account is offshore." I turned to look at him. His face was lit by the glow of his phone screen, and his expression was calm, focused, the same look he got when he was deep in a coding problem. "Brandon, how do you even know about—" "I've been researching, and I found something else." He turned his phone toward me. On the screen was a spreadsheet, neat, organized, color-coded. Dad's Capital One account, he used the same password pattern for everything. I got into his email, his bank portal, and his cloud storage. Mom, he's been moving money for over a year. Small amounts, $500 here, $1,000 there, into an account at a bank in the Cayman Islands, separate from the college fund. There's another $43,000 that he siphoned from the checking account over the last 14 months. The number hit me like a second punch. 43,000? $43,216. I have every transaction documented. Dates, amounts, destination account numbers. And Mom? He paused, and for the first time, a thin smile crossed his face. I also found Grandma Karen's bank records in his cloud. She didn't just help plan the trip. She co-signed on the offshore account. Her name is on it. Both of their names are on a foreign financial account that neither of them disclosed on their tax returns. I stared at him. Is that illegal? Yeah, Mom, very. Failing to report foreign bank accounts to the IRS is a federal offense. The penalties start at $10,000 per violation per year, and they've had that account open for at least 2 years. The backyard was quiet. Potato lifted his head, looked at Brandon, then put it back down. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn honked. I sat there in the dark, looking at my son. My 18-year-old son, who 48 hours ago had been a kid excited about his birthday party, and I realized that the surprise he'd promised wasn't anger, it wasn't revenge. It was something far more devastating. It was evidence. I'm not done yet, Brandon said, putting his phone away and leaning back in the chair. I need 3 more days, and then we're going to need that lawyer. Brandon, the retainer is $5,000. I know. I already called Aunt Linda. She's covering it. She told me not to tell you, but I'm telling you because you're my mom, and you deserve to know that people have your back. He stood up and looked down at me. We're not going to let him get away with this. Either of them. I promise you that. He went back inside. I stayed in the backyard for another hour, staring up at a sky I couldn't really see through the light pollution, feeling something I hadn't felt since Friday night. Hope. Small and fragile and terrified, but there. 3 days. Brandon asked for 3 days, and I gave them to him, because what else did I have? I went through those days like a ghost haunting my own house. I went to work at the dental office on Tuesday because the bills didn't care that my life had imploded. I smiled at patients and confirmed appointments and pretended I hadn't spent the previous night crying on my kitchen floor. Dr. Patel, my boss, asked if I was okay. I said I was fighting a cold. He didn't push it. People rarely do. On Wednesday evening, Brandon came downstairs with his laptop and sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where Michael had held my hand and lied to my face 6 days earlier. Brandon opened the laptop and turned it toward me. I need to walk you through everything, he said, and then we're calling Rachel Stern. What he showed me over the next hour was staggering. My 18-year-old son had built a case file that would have impressed a forensic accountant. He'd organized it into folders: financial records, communications, travel documents, tax discrepancies. Every email between Michael and Jenna, archived and time-stamped. Every transaction from the secret Capital One account. Every transfer to the Cayman Islands account. 47 separate transactions over 14 months, totaling $43,216. Karen's co-signature on the offshore account. Screenshots of the villa booking in the Maldives, paid for with a combination of Karen's funds and money siphoned from our household. There's one more thing, Brandon said. He clicked open a folder labeled Employment. Inside were emails between Michael and his boss, not about layoffs or promotions, but about a severance package. Michael had been laid off 3 months ago. 3 months. He'd been leaving the house every morning in his work clothes, driving somewhere, and coming home at night pretending he still had a job. The severance was $12,000. It had gone directly into the Cayman account. He wasn't working late, I said. The words tasted like ash. He wasn't working at all. I called Rachel Stern the next morning. Linda had already wired the $5,000 retainer, refusing to hear a single word of protest. Rachel listened to Brandon's findings over the phone, and for the first time in our interactions, her professional composure cracked. "Your son did this?" she asked. "He's very motivated," I said. "I need all of it, every file, every screenshot. Can he come to my office tomorrow?" Brandon and I drove to Hackensack on Friday morning. Rachel spent 2 hours going through his documentation. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked at Brandon with an expression I can only describe as respect. "You understand what you've found," she said. It wasn't a question. "Unreported foreign financial accounts," Brandon said. FBAR violations, potential wire fraud, dissipation of marital assets, and if the IRS gets involved, criminal tax evasion. Rachel looked at me. "Your son should consider law school." "He's going to study computer science," I said, "if we can figure out how to pay for it." "Oh, we'll figure that out." Rachel's smile was thin and sharp, the kind of smile that made me glad she was on my side. "Here's what we're going to do." The plan was precise. Rachel filed for divorce immediately, citing abandonment and dissipation of marital assets. She filed an emergency motion to freeze any accounts in Michael's name that we could identify. She contacted the IRS whistleblower office regarding the unreported Cayman Islands account, and she sent a very specific letter to Michael's email, the one Brandon had access to, informing him that divorce proceedings had been initiated and that failure to appear would result in default judgment. Then we waited. Not long. Michael and Karen and Jenna had been in the Maldives for 11 days when the letter hit Michael's inbox. I know the exact moment he read it, because Brandon was monitoring the email account. Wednesday, 3:47 p.m. Eastern Time. Michael opened the email, and within 15 minutes, he called me. I was standing in the backyard, watering the tomato plants I'd neglected all week, when my phone rang. His name on the screen made my hand tighten around the hose nozzle. "Ashley?" His voice was different, tight, strained. Nothing like the man who'd hummed in the shower while his secrets sat on the nightstand. "What is this? You filed for divorce? You stole $80,000 from your son and fled the country with your girlfriend. What did you think was going to happen?" "That money was in a joint account. I didn't steal anything." "Tell that to a judge, Michael." "Listen to me," his voice dropped. "I know how this looks, but I needed time. I needed space to figure things out. I was going to come back. I was going to explain." "Explain what? The Cayman Islands account? The 14 months of secret transfers? The fact that you were fired 3 months ago and didn't tell me?" Silence. A long, terrible silence. And in that silence, I heard everything. The collapse of every lie he'd built, every excuse crumbling in real time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, smaller, scared. "How do you know about that?" "Come home, Michael. Come home and face what you've done. Or don't, and a judge will decide everything without you." He hung up. 2 days later, a Friday, exactly 2 weeks after Brandon's ruined birthday, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I was in the kitchen. Brandon was at the table with his laptop. We looked at each other. "They're here," Brandon said. He closed the laptop and stood up. I walked to the front door and opened it. Michael was getting out of a taxi, sunburned and rumpled, pulling a suitcase from the trunk. Behind him, climbing out of the back seat, was Karen. She was wearing a linen pantsuit and her orthopedic sandals, and her face was arranged in an expression of wounded dignity, as if she were the one who'd been wronged. Jenna was not with them. I found out later she'd stayed in the Maldives. Michael had left her the return ticket and the remaining villa days, a parting gift funded by my son's future. Michael walked up the front path. He looked at me standing in the doorway, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw the man I'd married, the brown hair falling into his eyes, the way his shoulders curved when he was uncertain. Then the moment passed, and all I saw was a stranger who had looked me in the eyes and lied with the fluency of someone who'd been practicing for years. "Ash," he started. Don't. I stepped aside. Come in. Your son wants to talk to you. They walked into the kitchen. Michael first, Karen behind him. Brandon was standing by the table, his laptop open. He looked at his father. He looked at his grandmother. His face was calm, controlled, 18 years old and steadier than anyone else in the room. Hey, Dad, Brandon said. Happy belated birthday to me, right? Michael's face crumpled. Brandon, I am so sorry. I know. Sit down. Brandon's voice was quiet, but carried the weight of something immovable. Michael sat. Karen remained standing, arms crossed, chin lifted. Brandon, sweetheart, Karen began, this is between your parents. You don't need to sit down, Grandma. Brandon didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Karen sat. Brandon turned the laptop around. On the screen was the spreadsheet. Every transaction, every transfer, every lie. Organized and documented with the precision of someone who understood that data was power. $43,216 transferred to a Cayman Islands account over 14 months, Brandon said. $80,247 withdrawn from my college fund. $12,000 in severance pay you hid from Mom. A co-signed offshore account that neither of you reported to the IRS. He looked at Karen. Your name is on that account, Grandma. Your Social Security number. Your signature. Karen's face went white. Not pink, not pale, white. The blood drained from her skin so fast I thought she might faint. You had no right to access, Michael started. You had no right to steal from your son. Brandon's voice cracked for the first time. Just barely. Just enough to remind everyone in the room that he was still a kid. A kid who should have been celebrating his birthday, not prosecuting his father in his own kitchen. I earned that money too. Every time Mom said no to something so she could put another $200 in that account, I earned it. Every time she drove a car with a cracked windshield, I earned it. You took 17 years of her sacrifice and spent it on a beach vacation with your girlfriend. The kitchen was silent. The refrigerator hummed. Potato, lying in his bed by the back door, lifted his head and whined softly. Here's what's going to happen, Brandon continued, his voice steady again. Mom's attorney has already filed for divorce. An emergency motion is freezing your accounts. The IRS has been notified about the FDAR violations. That's a minimum $10,000 in penalties per year of noncompliance. And you've got at least 2 years of it. Both of you. He looked at Karen. If they pursue criminal charges, that's up to 5 years in federal prison. Karen made a sound, a small, strangled gasp. Michael put his head in his hands. Or, Brandon said, you can cooperate. Return every dollar. Sign the divorce papers without contesting. Walk away clean, or as clean as the IRS lets you. Your choice. Michael looked up. His eyes were red. Brandon, I never meant... I don't care what you meant. I care what you did. That sentence hung in the air like smoke. I stood by the counter and watched my son, the boy who'd worn nothing but black at 15, who'd taught himself to code from YouTube videos, who'd gotten into Rutgers and grinned like the world was full of possibility. And I understood that something had been taken from him that no amount of money could replace. His faith in his father, his belief that the people who loved him would protect him. Those things were gone, and the man sitting at our kitchen table had taken them as surely as he'd taken the $80,247. Michael and Karen cooperated. They didn't have a choice, really. Rachel Stern was relentless. Within 6 weeks, the divorce was filed and uncontested. Michael returned $62,000, not the full amount because the rest had been spent on flights, the villa, and Jenna's expenses, but Rachel negotiated that the remaining balance would come from his share of the house equity. The house sold in September. I got 73% of the proceeds. Karen paid a $47,000 penalty to the IRS and was put on a 3-year compliance monitoring plan. Michael's credit score cratered. He moved into a studio apartment in Newark. Jenna, from what I heard, stopped returning his calls somewhere around week 3 of the IRS investigation. Brandon started at Rutgers that fall. Not with $80,247, with $74,000 after legal fees and the gap Michael couldn't cover. It wasn't the full miracle I'd planned, but it was close enough. On move-in day, I helped Brandon carry boxes into his dorm room. It was small, cinder block walls, a twin bed, a desk by the window overlooking a parking lot. He set down the last box and turned to me. "Mom, we did it." I hugged him. I held on longer than he probably wanted, but he let me. When I pulled back, his eyes were wet, the first time I'd seen him cry since all of this started. "Thank you," I said, "for everything, for being smarter and braver than anyone should have to be at 18. He shrugged, but his jaw was tight. I just didn't want him to win. I drove home alone. The maple tree in the front yard was already starting to turn. Just the edges, the first hints of that ridiculous orange. The house was under contract. I had 30 days to pack up 16 years. Potato sat in the passenger seat with his head out the window, ears flapping. My phone buzzed. A text from Linda. "How's our college boy?" I typed back. "He's going to be okay. We both are." I meant it. Not because everything was fine. It wasn't, and it wouldn't be for a long time. I still woke up some nights at 3 a.m. reaching for a body that wasn't there. I still flinched when I checked my bank balance. I still had moments where the rage hit so hard I had to pull over and grip the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. But I had my son. I had my sister. I had a half-frosted birthday cake memory that would eventually become a story I could tell without breaking. The story of the year my husband stole everything, and my 18-year-old son made sure it was the last thing he ever took from us. Some people build walls to protect themselves. Brandon built a spreadsheet. And honestly, it worked a hell of a lot better.